The heat in Delhi was a physical weight that pressed against the ribs of every soul in Chandni Chowk. In the heart of the market, where the scent of frying jalebis collided with metallic exhaust and the humid odor of a million bodies, the air felt thick enough to swallow a person whole. Arjun sat at a stained tea stall, his fingers curled around a glass of cutting chai. He looked like he had been carved out of the city's grit, gray at the temples, eyes shadowed by a decade of sleepless nights. Once a decorated police officer, he was now a private investigator whose office was as worn as his spirit. The city was screaming today. It was a scream of collective terror. The streets were choked with the frantic energy of survival. Within a single week, 7 people had vanished. These were not typical disappearances. They were impossibilities. People were simply dissolving into the midday sun, vanishing in front of thousands of witnesses without leaving a footprint or a panicked cry. Arjun watched a group of men huddled around a transistor radio, their faces pale. They spoke in hushed tones about the city ghost, an ancient curse awakened by the city's endless expansion. Arjun knew better than to believe in ghosts, but he also knew the truth was often more terrifying than folklore. A woman interrupted his thoughts. She stood there, her sari torn at the shoulder, her eyes wide with a frantic energy. She told him about her son, a young boy who had been sitting right next to her in a moving rickshaw just 2 hours ago. One moment his hand was in hers. The next, the seat beside her was empty. The driver had not stopped. The traffic had been bumper to bumper, and yet the boy was gone. Arjun felt a cold spike of adrenaline. The detail of the hand, the sudden, impossible loss of physical contact, mirrored his own sister's disappearance 10 years ago. The woman's voice cracked, her desperation thick as she clutched a photo of her boy. Arjun took the case for the ghost of the girl he had failed to protect. He spent the afternoon scouring grainy, flickering CCTV footage from the intersection. At first, there was nothing but the chaotic dance of vehicles. But as he slowed the playback, he noticed a subtle, shimmering distortion in the air, followed by a momentary flicker in the video feed. It was not a visual anomaly alone. Every time the distortion appeared, the audio captured a faint, high-pitched frequency, a sound so sharp it felt like a needle pressing against the eardrum. Arjun rewound the clip again, in his eyes burning from the strain. Panic in the slums was escalating. Rumors of a colonial-era curse were being fueled by a discovery Arjun made at the site. Etched into the rusted metal of a nearby lamppost was a strange, intricate symbol, a sun eclipsed by a gear. It was the mark of a defunct secret society rumored to have experimented with forbidden sciences. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This symbol was a fresh carving, its edges sharp, suggesting the past was reaching out to claim the present. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Arjun returned to his cramped apartment. Waiting patiently on his doorstep was a brown package with no return address. His hand shook slightly as he tore it open. Inside, resting on a bed of old velvet, it was a silver wristwatch with a cracked face. He absolutely didn't need to check the inscription to know what it was. It was his sister's watch, the one she had been wearing the day she vanished. He held it to his ear, and instead of silence, he heard the steady pulse of the second hand. The watch felt cold, a relic from a life he had lost. It was ticking perfectly, as if 10 long years had never passed at all. The rhythmic ticking of the silver watch was a localized heartbeat in the silence of Arjun's apartment, a sound that felt less like a timepiece and more like a countdown. He examined the casing under a jeweler's loupe, finding a minute engraving near the crown, a set of coordinates that pointed not to a street address, but to a specific depth beneath the city. It led to the forgotten tunnels, a labyrinthine network of abandoned maintenance corridors beneath the New Delhi metro system, sealed off decades ago due to structural instability. As Arjun descended the rusted emergency ladder, the stifling heat of the surface gave way to a damp, tomb-like chill. The air was heavy with the smell of stagnant water and the metallic tang of old copper. Every step he took echoed through the darkness, reminding him that the city's foundations were built on secrets buried deep enough to be forgotten by the sun. He remembered the day his sister disappeared as if it were carved into his retinas. The monsoon clouds had turned the Delhi sky a bruised purple, and the streets were a river of umbrellas. He had been 10, she was 8. He remembered the precise moment his grip on her hand had failed, the slickness of rain-drenched skin. Moraz, a sudden surge of the crowd toward a passing festival float, and the horrifying realization that his palm was suddenly touching nothing but the humid air. That singular moment of failure had defined every choice he had made since. It was the reason he wore the badge, and the reason he eventually lost it. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing against his lungs as he moved deeper into the subterranean gloom. In a hollowed-out alcove near a disused ventilation shaft, Arjun found his first lead. A blind street musician sat on a crate, his fingers dancing over a battered sarangi. The music was a haunting, high-pitched melody that seemed to mimic the frequency Arjun had heard in the CCTV footage. He looked like a relic of an older world, one that understood the city's heartbeat better than any digital sensor. And the man didn't startle when Arjun approached. Instead, he spoke of the harvest. The musician claimed the people weren't being taken for ransom, but were being harvested for their memories. A machine can compute 1,000,000 variables, the old man whispered, his voice like dry leaves, but it cannot understand the weight of a first love or the sting of a betrayal. They're stealing the ghosts from our heads to give life to something made of silicon. The investigation took a sharp, dangerous turn when a beam of light cut through the dark. Inspector Sharma stood at the end of the tunnel, flanked by 2 officers in tactical gear. The animosity between them was a living thing, born from years of Sharma's ladder climbing and Arjun's refusal to look the other way. Sharma issued a cold threat, telling Arjun that the disappearances were a matter of national security that a broken-down investigator had no business poking into. The efficiency in Sharma's voice suggested a cover-up that reached far beyond local precincts, suggesting the government itself was shielding the perpetrators behind this technological nightmare. After evading Sharma's men through a narrow crawl space, Arjun found the heart of the conspiracy. He broke into a restricted sub-level under a new corporate skyscraper. The space was a grotesque fusion of ancient stone and cutting-edge technology. In a massive underground chamber, he found mountains of personal belongings: shoes, rusted keys, and children's toys. These were the discarded remnants of lives interrupted, proof of a systemic erasure happening right under the city's nose. While hacking into a local terminal, Arjun's blood ran cold. He found digital ledgers linking Sharma's private accounts to the shadowy tech corporation responsible for the site. The betrayal was complete. The law was not just failing the people, it was selling them. The psychological toll of the tunnels began to manifest as a low-frequency hum that vibrated in Arjun's teeth. He began to hear a voice, thin and desperate, echoing through the ventilation ducts. It was his sister's voice, calling his name from the dark. He clutched his head, questioning if the stagnant air or the frequency was finally breaking his mind. But then he stumbled into a high-security monitoring suite. On a wall of flickering monitors, he saw them. The victims were suspended in glowing, amber-colored vats. He saw the rickshaw boy, his small face pressed against the glass. And in the final monitor, his heart stopped. There was his sister. She looked exactly as she had 10 years ago, frozen in time, her eyes wide and staring hauntingly into the lens. The air above Delhi was thick with the scent of marigolds and incense as the city celebrated a massive religious festival. The stones seemed to hum with the collective prayers of 1,000,000 people. This cacophony of drums and chanting provided the perfect acoustic camouflage. Arjun didn't wait for reinforcements that would never come. He knew the maintenance shafts of the city better than his own heartbeat. Armed with nothing but a heavy wrench and the burning memory of his sister's face, he breached the facility's primary cooling vent. The transition from the jubilant roar of the festival to the sterile hum of the underground lair was jarring. Here, amidst miles of fiber-optic cables and glowing vats, the corporate monster breathed. The predictive AI wasn't just a program. It was a hungry god fed on human experience. He reached the central hub, where rows of bodies floated in suspension. Each glowing chamber was a testament to the cold, mechanical cruelty of those who sought to play God. The corporation had discovered that human intuition was the final frontier for their predictive algorithms. By freezing consciousness in a state of perpetual processing, they could forecast market shifts and civil unrest with terrifying accuracy. Each vat was a prison of thought. The victims weren't dead. They were biological processors, where their souls stretched thin to calculate the city's future. The rickshaw boy was there, his tiny chest barely moving, a small component in a cold metal world. Arjun found the master console. To disconnect the vats and wake the living, he had to trigger a system-wide purge. The AI had woven the older stored memories of those who had been there for a decade into its core architecture. If he shut it down, the newer victims would walk free, but the older consciousnesses, existing only as digital echoes, would be permanently erased. His sister was the foundation of the very thing he needed to destroy. Looking at her image on the screen, he felt the agonizing weight of his childhood failure. To save the children, he had to lose her again, and this time, it would be forever. Security guards echoed through the chamber, led by Inspector Sharma, and the officer screamed that Arjun was destroying progress. But Arjun didn't argue. He moved with lethal grace, a shadow among shadows, his every strike a response to a decade of pain. He used the maze of the facility against them, leading the guards into dark corridors where steam pipes leaked and shadows were deep. He moved like a phantom, taking them down with the efficiency of a man who had nothing left to lose. He finally cornered Sharma near the power core. The fight was brutal, fueled by years of resentment, but Arjun's conviction was the sharper weapon. He left his rival gasping in the dark. Arjun returned to the console. He looked at the rickshaw boy and then at the digital ghost of his sister. With a final agonizing pull of the lever, he initiated the purge. A blinding light surged through the tubes, chance followed by a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped. The amber vats shattered, spilling their precious cargo onto the floor. The living victims began to cough, gasping for air. Above, the facility's servers melted into slag, erasing the data that had cost so many lives and souls. Within hours, victims were found wandering near metro entrances, dazed but alive. The truth had finally set them all free. The digital paper trail Arjun leaked sparked a firestorm that corporate lawyers couldn't quench. Sharma was dragged away in cuffs, his career in ruins. Days later, Arjun stood at the intersection where his sister had first vanished. The evening breeze carried the scent of rain, a cleansing touch for a city that had been holding its breath. The guilt that shadowed him had finally lifted, replaced by peace. He had protected the city's future by letting go of a past he couldn't reclaim. As he turned to leave, his phone vibrated. He answered, hearing a distant temple bell and a soft voice whispering, "Thank you."